My name is Evelyn Carter, and the day I buried my only son was the day I realized grief has many faces, some kind, others cruel. The air inside St. Augustine's chapel was heavy that morning. Rain tapped against the stained glass windows, a slow, mournful rhythm that matched the beating of my heart. Rows of black coats filled the pews, faces bowed, some in real sorrow, others just performing sympathy. But I wasn't looking at them. My eyes were fixed on the wooden casket at the front, the one holding everything that had ever mattered to me. My son, Daniel Carter, was gone. 35 years old, a man who had built his own world, his own home, his own family. I had raised him alone after his father died when Daniel was 7. Every step he took in life felt like proof that I'd done something right, even when the world had given me nothing but struggle. And now, I was standing here, surrounded by flowers and whispers, trying to remember how to breathe. The service began. The priest's voice echoed softly through the church, reciting the words of farewell, but all I could hear were echoes of Daniel's laughter, the sound of his little boy voice asking, "Mom, will everything be okay?" I had promised him it would, and now that promise lay beneath a polished oak lid. As people began stepping forward to pay their final respects, I held a single white rose in my trembling hand, Daniel's favorite flower. I waited patiently at the back of the line, clutching it so tightly that the stem dug into my palm. Each person knelt, murmured something, and walked away. Then it was my turn. That's when she stepped in front of me. Lydia, my daughter-in-law, my son's widow. She was dressed in black silk, her hair perfectly styled, makeup flawless. Even her grief looked practiced. Her eyes, however, were cold as marble. When I tried to step around her, she raised a manicured hand. "Please don't," she said quietly, but loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. I blinked. "I just want to say goodbye." Her jaw tightened, the corners of her lips curving into a polite but sharp smile. "This is for family only." The words hung in the air, heavy and cruel. Conversations faltered. Even the priest looked up. I stared at her, confused. I'm her mother. Her eyes didn't soften. If anything, they hardened. "You were," she said. "But Daniel had a new family now. I decide what happens here." My world tilted. For a heartbeat, I couldn't breathe. A few guests glanced away, pretending not to hear, while others shifted uncomfortably in their seats. The silence that followed was worse than any insult. It was agreement by omission. I could have screamed. I could have demanded respect. But instead, I smiled. Not because I wasn't hurt. Oh, I was shattered inside. But because I knew something she didn't. This wasn't the end of my story. Without a word, I stepped around her and placed my rose gently beside Daniel's casket. My fingers lingered on the polished wood. "Goodbye, sweetheart," I whispered. Then I turned and walked to the back of the chapel, head held high. The service continued. Lydia sat in the front pew, dabbing her eyes with a silk handkerchief, looking every inch the devoted widow. I sat alone in the back, unseen, unacknowledged, but still his mother. Always his mother. When the final hymn ended, people began filing out, their voices low. I stayed seated for a while, letting the crowd thin out. My heart felt like glass cracking under pressure. That's when Mr. Barnes, Daniel's lawyer, approached me. He was an older man, with kind eyes and a steady voice. "Mrs. Carter," he said softly, "I'm
deeply sorry for your loss. Daniel spoke of you often." I nodded, unable to reply. "There's to be a private reading of the will this afternoon. Daniel left specific instructions. You might want to be there." "Specific instructions?" I repeated, my voice faint. "Yes," he said carefully, glancing toward Lydia, who was surrounded by people offering condolences like gifts. He made it very clear. Something in his tone made my stomach twist. I left the church before Lydia could look my way. Outside, the rain had stopped, but the world still felt gray. I stood under the stone archway watching as people climbed into their cars, umbrellas blooming like dark flowers. When I finally stepped into my car, I let out the breath I'd been holding all day. My reflection in the rearview mirror looked older than I remembered. Grief had a way of aging you in hours. I thought about Lydia, how she had changed Daniel, how she'd pulled him away slowly, piece by piece, until I only saw fragments of my son in him. When he married her, I told myself to be happy for him. I had even given them the down payment for their first home, a gift I could barely afford. And yet, she'd erased me from his life as easily as deleting a contact on her phone. Now, even in death, she wanted to erase me again. But something told me she wouldn't succeed. As I drove to the reception hall where the will would be read, I whispered to myself, "Daniel, my love, whatever you left behind, I just hope you remembered your mother." Inside the hall, the atmosphere was different, tense, expectant. People gathered around long tables filled with coffee cups and untouched pastries. Lydia sat at the head, back straight, her expression calm but smug. When she saw me, her smile faltered. "You shouldn't be here," she said under her breath. I met her gaze evenly. I was invited. "By whom?" she asked, narrowing her eyes. Before I could answer, a familiar voice spoke behind me. "I invited her," said Mr. Barnes, stepping forward with a brown envelope in his hands. The room went still. Lydia's smile froze, the color draining from her face. Mr. Barnes placed the envelope on the table and looked around. Daniel left instructions that this letter be read aloud before the will. It's addressed to both Mrs. Lydia Carter and Mrs. Evelyn Carter. You could hear a pin drop. Lydia laughed softly, a brittle, nervous sound, but I could see the tension in her jaw. She didn't know what was coming, and neither did I. As Mr. Barnes adjusted his glasses and began unfolding the letter, my heart began to pound. I didn't know what my son had written, but deep down, I felt it. This was the moment everything would change.
Mr. Barnes unfolded the letter with deliberate care, as if aware of the weight it carried. The paper trembled slightly in his hands, not from weakness, but from the electricity that filled the room. Lydia leaned back in her chair, arms crossed, the picture of calm defiance. I sat opposite her, my hands clasped together in my lap. Around us, a few relatives and friends who had stayed for the reading shifted uncomfortably, as though they were witnessing a storm begin to form. Mr. Barnes cleared his throat and began to read. "To my wife Lydia and my mother, Evelyn, if you're hearing this, it means I'm gone, and I can only hope that what I say next brings some light instead of more pain. I've lived a life between two women, one who gave me life, and one I built a life with. You both have shaped me in ways words can't describe, but there are truths I left unsaid, and regrets I carried quietly. Today, I want them to be heard." My breath caught. "Mom," the letter continued, "I know it hasn't been easy. You sacrificed everything for me, working double shifts, skipping meals, selling your jewelry so I could stay in school. You never let me feel poor, even when we had nothing. Every success I had began with you. A soft murmur ran through the room. Lydia's painted smile began to crack at the edges. Lydia, the letter went on, I know you wanted a life of comfort and appearances. You got that. But in building that image, you built walls. Walls between us, between me and my mother. You didn't have to compete with her. I loved you both differently. But you made me choose, and that choice broke something in me. A heavy silence fell. You could almost hear a crack in Lydia's composure. Now to the matter of my estate. Daniel's words carried a tone that was calm but commanding. Everything I owned, our home, the savings, the business shares, must go exactly as I've outlined in the will, and this part is non-negotiable.
Lydia straightened, her eyes gleaming with expectation. Before any property or account is transferred, the letter said, my lawyer is to follow my personal instructions. Lydia, you will receive what's due to you as my spouse. But before any of that happens, I want you to do one thing. Mr. Barnes hesitated before reading the next line, his voice quieter now. You must hand my mother the envelope I left in the top drawer of my desk. It contains something that belongs to her, something she's waited years to get back. Lydia's head snapped toward him. What envelope? Mr. Barnes looked at her calmly. You know the one, Mrs. Carter. Daniel left it with specific labeling. For Mom. Give it to her when I'm gone. I don't remember that, she stammered. There was nothing like that. He placed a small brown envelope on the table. Then you won't mind if I fulfill his instruction myself. He gave me a duplicate copy, just in case. The moment he said that, I felt every eye in the room turn to me. My fingers trembled as Mr. Barnes slid the envelope across the table. My name, Evelyn Carter, was written on it in Daniel's handwriting. I took a deep breath and opened it. Inside was a folded letter and a single key. The paper smelled faintly of his cologne. My eyes blurred as I read, Mom, this key belongs to the house on Willow Creek, the one you and Dad dreamed of buying before he died. I bought it a year ago and restored it in secret. Every plank, every garden stone, every picture frame was chosen with you in mind. I wanted to surprise you, but life ran out too fast. It's yours now, Mom. No one can take it from you. I gasped softly, covering my mouth. A few people in the room whispered. Mr. Barnes nodded solemnly. Your son made sure ownership was transferred directly to you, Mrs. Carter. The deed is already filed. Lydia shot to her feet. That's impossible. That property was purchased during our marriage. It should be mine. Mr. Barnes's voice remained calm. Actually, no. Daniel bought it with funds from his personal inheritance, an account separate from your joint assets. It is legally his mother's property now. Lydia's face twisted in disbelief. He wouldn't do that to me. Mr. Barnes handed her a copy of Daniel's instructions. He did. He wanted his mother to have peace, not pity. The room felt electric, like a storm breaking open. I couldn't speak. My son, my sweet boy, had planned something so beautiful, so deeply personal, even as his own life was fading fast. Lydia collapsed back into her chair, her face pale. The room was silent except for the ticking of the clock on the wall. Mr. Barnes folded Daniel's letter gently and said, There's more in the will, but Daniel's priority was making sure his mother was cared for. He said she'd been forgotten long enough. Tears rolled down my cheeks, but they weren't just from sorrow anymore. For the first time that day, I felt something else, vindication.
Lydia stayed silent for a long moment before whispering, "She doesn't deserve it." I looked at her then, really looked at her. Her elegance was a mask, and beneath it was fear. "I didn't ask for any of this," I said softly. "All I ever wanted was my son's love." Lydia glared at me, her lips trembling. "You always made him feel guilty about loving me." "No, Lydia, I made him remember where he came from." Before she could respond, Mr. Barnes cleared his throat again. "There's one final note Daniel included before we proceed with the rest of the reading." He unfolded a small page attached to the back of the letter. "Mom, if you're hearing this, promise me something. Don't let anyone make you feel like you don't belong. You built me. You raised me. And no matter where life took me, I always carried you with me. You are family. Always." My heart broke and healed in the same instant. Lydia stared down at the table, speechless, her eyes glassy. The letter ended, and for the first time since Daniel's death, I felt like he was right there beside me, protecting me, defending me, loving me. But little did I know, this was just the beginning, because hidden inside that letter was a clue. A secret Daniel left behind that would change everything I thought I knew about his life and his death.
After everyone left the lawyer's office, I sat there, still clutching the letter and the small silver key. The words on that page kept echoing in my head. You are family. Always. Mr. Barnes waited quietly for me to compose myself. His old desk lamp cast a warm amber glow across the room, and the ticking of his clock was the only sound breaking the silence. "Mrs. Carter," he said softly, "there's something else I think you should see." Daniel left an additional envelope, one that he asked me to give you only after the will was read. He reached into his briefcase and pulled out another envelope, this one thicker, sealed with a red wax stamp. On the front, in Daniel's handwriting, were the words, "For Mom, only when you're ready." I hesitated, my fingers trembling as I broke the seal. Inside was another handwritten letter, and a photograph. The photo showed Daniel standing in front of a small school, a run-down building with cracked walls but smiling children in front of it. He looked proud, almost radiant. On the back of the photo, he had written, "They call it Hope Haven. It's your legacy, Mom." My eyes widened. The letter inside explained everything. "Mom, I never told anyone, not even Lydia, but I've been running a small foundation for the past 5 years. Remember the kids you used to tutor for free after your nursing shifts? The ones whose parents couldn't afford school? I never forgot how much you cared for them. I started Hope Haven in your name, a scholarship fund and school in our old town. Every month, part of my earnings went there. The kids know your story. They know how you raised me with nothing but love and strength. When I'm gone, I want you to continue it. That's why I left you the property on Willow Creek. It's not just a home. It's meant to be the foundation's main office, a place where your heart can keep helping others." My heart pounded. I could hardly believe what I was reading. My son, my Daniel, had carried my spirit of kindness forward even when I thought he'd forgotten me. Mr. Barnes smiled faintly. "He admired you deeply, Mrs. Carter. Everything he built, it all came from your example." I wiped my tears. He never said a word about this. "He didn't want praise," the lawyer said gently. "He wanted to make sure you'd be proud of him when you found out." I looked at the photo again. Daniel, surrounded by children who adored him. The sight filled me with both sorrow and pride. But then I realized something else. If Lydia had known about Hope Haven, she would have tried to shut it down. She cared more about luxury than legacy, and that explained why Daniel had kept it hidden, not just from her, but from everyone. Mr. Barnes seemed to sense my thoughts. "There's one more thing, Evelyn.
Lydia may contest the will. She's already made remarks about it being unfair. I nodded. I expected as much. He leaned forward. Daniel anticipated that. He left a video recording to be played if Lydia challenges anything. Would you like to see it? I froze, the air leaving my lungs. A video? Yes. He recorded it just a month before his passing. He turned the computer screen toward me, clicked a file, and there he was. My Daniel. He looked thin but calm, sitting in his study, his wedding ring glinting under the light. His eyes were soft but determined. "Hi, Mom," he began, smiling faintly. "If you're watching this, it means Lydia's probably furious, but that's okay. She'll survive. I wanted to talk to you directly. I know our relationship grew distant after I got married, and I know that hurt you. But I never stopped loving you, not for a second. You were my strength when I had none. You taught me what real wealth is: compassion, honesty, faith. And I wanted to live by those values, even if it meant living quietly. That's why I started Hope Haven. It's my gift to the world. Your gift, really. Lydia never understood that part of me, and that's okay. But you do. You always did." My eyes filled again. I reached out instinctively, touching the screen as if I could feel his warmth. "So, if she tries to fight you, Mom, just remember this. Everything's already taken care of, legally, financially, spiritually. You don't owe anyone an explanation. You just keep being you. And please, visit Hope Haven for me. Meet the kids. Tell them my favorite story, the one about the boy who almost gave up, but his mother wouldn't let him." The video ended with Daniel's soft laugh, the same one I used to hear echoing through the house when he was little. I sat in silence, the weight of his words pressing gently on my heart. Mr. Barnes handed me a tissue. "He wanted you to know he found peace, Mrs. Carter. He loved you until his last day." I nodded slowly, holding the photo to my chest. He was always my good boy. When I left the office that afternoon, the sky was painted in shades of orange and gold. I walked down the steps with Daniel's letter in my hand, the key glinting in the fading light. But as I reached the car park, I saw Lydia standing by her car, waiting. Her eyes were cold, her jaw tight. "You think he loved you more. You were just a guilt trip he couldn't escape." I stopped, facing her calmly. "You can believe whatever helps you sleep, Lydia, but the truth is, you never really knew him." Her lips tightened. "You'll regret crossing me." I smiled faintly. "No, I've already lost everything that could hurt me. Now I only have what's left: his love and his legacy." She scoffed, turning sharply to her car. "We'll see what the court says." As she drove off, I stood there in the golden light, clutching the key to the home my son built for me, the home that symbolized not wealth or power, but love remembered. And deep down, I knew this wasn't over. Lydia wouldn't go quietly, but neither would I. For the first time in years, I wasn't afraid, because now I had something worth fighting for. Not money, not revenge, but Daniel's truth.
It didn't take long for Lydia to strike back. 2 weeks after the will reading, I received a letter from her lawyer. It was formal, cold, just like her. She was contesting the will, claiming that Daniel had been mentally unfit when he wrote it. The accusations stung more than I expected. How could she accuse my son, the man who built businesses, who planned every detail of his life, of being unfit? Mr. Barnes called me the moment he received the same notice. "She's serious," he warned. "She's hiring an aggressive firm. But don't worry, Daniel was meticulous. We have medical records, witnesses, and even that video." I sighed. "She won't stop until she destroys everything he built." He nodded solemnly. "Then we make sure she can't." The following weeks were a blur of legal meetings, phone calls, and sleepless nights. I wasn't used to this world of lawyers and documents. I'd spent my life raising Daniel, cooking dinners, saving pennies for his education, not fighting in courtrooms. But each time I thought about giving up, I replayed Daniel's words in my mind. "Just keep being you, Mom. You don't owe anyone an explanation." So I pressed on. The hearing was set for a cold, rainy Monday morning. I arrived early, dressed in a navy coat Daniel had given me years ago for my birthday. It was a little worn at the sleeves, but I wore it like armor. Lydia arrived moments later, elegant as always, her heels clicking sharply against the marble floor. She didn't look at me. Not once. Inside the courtroom, her lawyer painted a cruel picture. They called me a lonely old woman clinging to the past. They said Daniel was pressured into sentimentality. They even questioned his mental state in his final months. Every word was a dagger. But when it was our turn, Mr. Barnes stood calmly, his voice clear and unwavering. "Your Honor," he began, "Daniel Carter was of sound mind, not only when he wrote his will, but up to the very end of his life. We have his doctor's testimony, his financial records, and, most importantly, a video message recorded by Daniel himself." The courtroom buzzed. Lydia's expression tightened. The judge nodded. "Let's see it." The lights dimmed slightly as the video began to play on a large screen. And there he was, my Daniel again. His voice filled the room. "If anyone's watching this, it means my will is being challenged. Let me make something clear. I made every decision freely, with a clear mind and full heart. The person I trust most in this world is my mother, Evelyn Carter. She has never taken anything from me, only given. The home I left her isn't a reward, it's a thank you. And if anyone questions my mental state, maybe they should question their own motives first." The room fell silent. Even the judge seemed moved. He looked down, clearing his throat before speaking. "That is a powerful statement, Mrs. Carter." I nodded gently, tears welling in my eyes. "That was my son, Your Honor. He meant every word." Lydia sat frozen, her face pale. Her lawyer shifted uncomfortably, whispering something to her. She shook her head, her composure cracking for the first time. Then came the closing remarks. Mr. Barnes stood and said simply, "This isn't about wealth. It's about love and respect. Daniel Carter made a choice, not out of guilt, but gratitude, to honor the woman who shaped his life. The evidence speaks for itself." The judge took a moment, then looked up. "The court finds no grounds to contest the will. The late Mr. Carter's wishes will stand." It was over. I sat there, numb, as Lydia shot me a look filled with fury and humiliation. Her carefully built world had just collapsed. When the gavel came down, I felt Daniel's presence beside me, as if he were whispering, "You did it, Mom." Outside the courtroom, the rain had stopped. The air smelled fresh, alive. Lydia stormed past me, muttering something under her breath. I didn't stop her. I didn't need to. For once, I wasn't angry. I only felt peace. Mr. Barnes joined me by the steps. "You handled that beautifully," he said. "I didn't do anything," I replied softly. "Daniel did." He smiled. "He may have left the world, but his love still fights for you." That night, I went home and sat at my kitchen table, the same table where Daniel once did his homework as a boy. The house was quiet, but it no longer felt empty. I pulled out his photo again, the one from Hope Haven. I knew what I had to do next. The next morning, I packed a small suitcase and set out for Willow Creek, the address Daniel had written in his letter. It was a 2-hour drive through winding country roads, past golden fields, and small towns that looked like they'd been forgotten by time. When I arrived, I saw it. A charming brick house surrounded by open land, and beyond it, a modest building with a faded sign that read, "Hope Haven."
education for every child. I stepped inside, my heart pounding. Children's laughter echoed through the halls. A young teacher greeted me warmly. "You must be Mrs. Carter," she said, her smile bright. "Daniel talked about you all the time." I blinked. "He did?" She nodded. "He said you were the reason he started all this, that everything good in him came from you." For the first time in months, I smiled, a real, unbroken smile. As I walked through the classrooms, children ran past me, laughing and learning, their joy filling the air. Daniel's photo hung on the wall beside mine under a simple plaque that read, "Inspired by Evelyn Carter, a mother's love that never fades." I stood there quietly, tears streaming down my face, realizing that my son had left me something far greater than an inheritance. He had left me a purpose.
The sun was setting behind the hills of Willow Creek when I found myself standing in the courtyard of Hope Haven. The air was warm, filled with the sound of children playing, their laughter bouncing off the old brick walls that my son had once helped restore. I could almost see Daniel here, sleeves rolled up, hammer in hand, grinning like he used to when he believed the world could be fixed with enough love and hard work. That night, I stayed in the small guest house beside the school. I couldn't sleep. The memories of the past few months played over and over in my mind. The funeral, Lydia's cruel words, the courtroom battle, and finally, the truth that had silenced everyone. For the first time in a long while, I didn't feel like an unwanted guest in my own life. I sat by the window, watching the moon cast its light across the schoolyard. Daniel's letter lay open on my lap. His handwriting, strong yet gentle, felt like his voice speaking through time. "If you're reading this, Mom, it means I'm gone. But please don't grieve too long. Go to Hope Haven. Be there for the kids. That's where you'll find me again." Tears fell quietly onto the page. "Oh, Daniel," I whispered, "you were right. You're here. Everywhere." The next morning, I met with the school director, a kind woman named Clara. She showed me around the classrooms, bright spaces filled with art, books, and the kind of hope only children can bring into a place. "Your son left us a beautiful legacy," she said, as she led me into a room filled with photos of Daniel handing out supplies, teaching, laughing. "But he also left something for you." She opened a small wooden chest. Inside was a notebook, Daniel's journal. I held it carefully, like something sacred. On the first page he had written, "Everything I learned about love, I learned from my mother." My heart broke and healed all at once. Clara smiled softly. "He wanted you to help continue what he started. The board would love for you to join us, Mrs. Carter. As an advisor, maybe even a mentor, you could tell the kids your stories." For a moment, I was speechless. Then I nodded slowly. "Yes," I said, my voice trembling. "I'd love that." From that day on, I spent every week at Hope Haven. I taught the children simple things: how to bake, how to write letters, how to listen to their elders. I told them about Daniel, about his dreams, and about how kindness was the truest form of strength. The children listened as if I were telling them a fairy tale. Some of them didn't have grandparents, and they began calling me Grandma Evelyn. The name filled my heart with warmth I hadn't felt in years. Months passed. Lydia never reached out again. I heard she sold her house and moved away, perhaps too ashamed or too broken to face what had happened. Part of me wanted to hate her forever, but as time softened the edges of my pain, I realized that anger would only chain me to the past.
One afternoon, I received a letter from her. Short, hesitant, written in a shaky hand. Mrs. Carter, I know I can never undo what I said or how I treated you. Losing Daniel made me cruel. I was scared of being alone and I took that fear out on you. I see now what he saw, your strength, your grace. Thank you for loving him the way you did. And, Lydia, I sat for a long time after reading it, the paper trembling in my fingers. Then I folded it carefully and placed it beside Daniel's journal. Forgiveness didn't erase the hurt, but it freed me from it. That spring, Hope Haven held a dedication ceremony for a new library, one built in Daniel's memory. They asked me to give the opening speech. As I stood at the podium, surrounded by children, teachers, and members of the community, I looked up at the sign above the door. The Daniel Carter Memorial Library, a gift of hope and love. The crowd quieted. I took a deep breath and began. People often say that when someone you love dies, a part of you dies with them. But I've learned something different. A part of them lives on in you. My son believed in giving even when he had little left to give. He believed in second chances and in kindness when the world seemed cruel. And he believed in me, even when others didn't. My voice wavered, but I continued, stronger now. So if you ever feel small or forgotten or like you don't belong, remember this. Love doesn't need permission to exist. It simply does. And the people who truly love you, they never leave. They become the quiet strength inside you. There wasn't a dry eye in the audience. Even the children stood still listening. When I finished, the crowd rose to its feet. The applause echoed through the courtyard like thunder. But in that moment, I didn't hear them. I heard only Daniel's voice, soft and steady, whispering, "You did it, Mom." As the crowd began to disperse, a little girl tugged at my sleeve. "Grandma Evelyn, was your son a hero?" I smiled down at her. "Yes, sweetheart," I replied, "he was. But not because of what he had, because of how he loved." That evening, as I walked home through the golden light of sunset, I felt something I hadn't in years. Peace. True, quiet peace. At home, I placed Daniel's journal on the mantel beside his photo. The house no longer felt empty. It was filled with laughter, love, and the echo of a promise kept. I whispered into the silence, "I belong, Daniel. I always did." And in that stillness, I could almost swear I heard his voice again, not from the grave, but from my heart.